basically, what is a private investigator? It's really an independent civilian investigators hired by individuals and organizations, to deal with civil criminal matters. Because we've gone through the training, because we're licensed, we're able to do more than just the average citizen. There, of course, are laws that we have to pass, the ethics and laws that we're required to make sure that we're in line with when we're performing these jobs for individuals or organizations. But as private investigators, we have to have a keen eye, excellent observation skills, analytical mind. A lot of times you have to think outside the box. That's something we'll talk about, report writing, when we talk about the surveillance. You have to be able to think, outside the box. Sometimes you have to be, required to make a decision right then and right there. Hey, how am I going to solve this? Okay, this just happened. Typically in this industry, we'll talk about that. You're reporting to an operations manager. You're calling into your base, same way as the police do. But there are some situations where you have to make a decision. It may be involved with mobile surveillance. It may be involved with, just the decision in terms of how you want to or need to obtain this video. And if it's legal for you to do it the way that you want to do it. It's actually one of the fastest growing fields, most of the time because it's not a whole lot of requirements. You're not required to have a college degree. Some states do require you to have a college degree if you want to run a company. Georgia would be one. If not, then you have to have so many years of experience, or you have to have so many years of a military background. So, but regardless of the path, the private investigator, chooses, the talents lie to be able to gather and analyze information. So, we do undercover surveillance, we do surveillance activities. An undercover surveillance would be companies may hire you to, you come in, you go through training, like we're going through training now, as a normal employee with regular employees. You go through the training, you'll be working, let's say, in that warehouse, driving that forklift, but you're there to observe and investigate something that they may have. They may be having theft in the locker room. There may be drugs being sold there. So you go in undercover, work that shift like you normally work your shift, 7 to 3, whichever one it is. The only people that typically know that you're there would be senior management. HR will consider you a normal person. So you could literally be an investigator working the case, and that foreman may come to you and put you on final warning. Of course, it's not going to happen that you're going to get terminated, but, based on your job performance, because he or she sees you as a normal employee, and they don't know what you're truly there for. Documenting, reporting the results of the investigation, interviewing people, and research. So briefly, we'll touch on the history of private investigations. Private investigations, of course, have been around for years, but the original detective agency was Pinkerton. And Pinkerton, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was in Pennsylvania, was the first true private investigation company. Pinkerton, I'm sure everybody knows, they were also a security company as well. So they did security as well as investigation. They were involved in a lot of labor disputes in terms of investigating that particular situation. But since, the Pinkerton, back in 1850, as you can see, Alan Pinkerton, it's evolved to include so many other things. There are a lot of things that I touched on as well. The background checks, the corporate investigations, training. And then, of course, there have been, industry associations created and ethical standards. You've got the legal and regulatory framework, throughout the history of private investigation, the technical advancements in terms of the equipment and tools. We'll actually look at some of those. There are a lot of, when you think back, how time has evolved, where we are now with the tools. And actually, probably one of the best tools I'll share with you guys, we all have, in our possession. Diverse specializations, like I said, fraud, insurance fraud, which is something that we mainly focus on. Cybersecurity, missing persons. I told you about individuals looking for homeless individuals, corporate intelligence, so forth and so on. Some of the notable private investigators, Alan Pinkerton, he's considered the father of private investigation. Kate Warren, she was the first female detective in the United States, and she was hired by Pinkerton in 1856. She actually paved the way for a lot of women now in the investigative industry. We've got this particular gentleman. He was a former criminal who later became a private investigator. And a lot of times in situations, and we've seen them, there have been movies about situations like this. I think that movie Catch Me If You Can, where the guy was forging the checks, and eventually he went on to work for the FBI. Then, of course, there's William Burns. He was also a well-known detective. He actually started the International Detective Agency. So he worked on a host of cases, internationally. So just to summarize, what did we cover? We covered what is an investigator, the history of private investigation, and notable private investigators. Well, let's dive in and talk about the state laws and requirements. And what I'm going to do is what I'm covering here would be Tennessee laws, state laws and requirements. So the requirements to become a private investigator in the state of Tennessee, you have to be at least 21 years of age. There's no educational requirements to become a private investigator. This course, of course, will give you the foundation. Typically, individuals who are in this field may have a criminal justice degree, associate's level or bachelor level, but that doesn't require. I know individuals who have no college degree. It's that analytical mind, is to be able to think out the box and make decisions sometimes on the fly. They say experience requirements must have at least 3 years of investigative experience or 2 years of investigative experience, or an associate, 2 to 3 years, associate degree in criminal justice, 4 years degree, years of experience as law enforcement. This segment here really just coincides with the fact so the way Tennessee does it now, you'll become licensed. You will work as an intern for another company until you reach a certain number of hours. Once you reach those hours, which they typically give a 6-month window to reach those hours, then you will take the examination to become a licensed private investigator.
Does military happen to?
Military does happen. So when you put in your initial application, that's what you want to let the people know at the state, because they take that into consideration. And a lot of times that's just to kind of fast track. You still have to take that private investigation examination with the state, but that's just to fast track, the investigative side of the process. There's a background check that needs to be completed. There's, fingerprinting. It's normally done with I believe the FBI. I believe it's the FBI or TBI. I'm not sure here in Tennessee, but they'll do a full comprehensive background check. I don't think it would have to be a hard crime. to keep you from becoming licensed. Some states are a little bit more particular, but there are some states, even if you've committed certain crimes, if it's been expunged or it can be explained, you can still be licensed. So but typically, it'd have to be a hard crime. You have your state licensing examination that you would have to take and pass 75, you get at least 75% on that examination. I won't say that the examination is easy, but I won't say that it's hard. It's kind of been modified a lot more. We're covering a lot more of some things outside of private investigation. I've been told that we've got questions about the flag and how many stars on the flag, how many stripes, what do they represent. Originally, when I took the examination back in, 2000, it was, pretty straightforward. It was, what was in the book. So I think a lot of that other stuff may just be a filler, but it's going to be the TCA, Tennessee Code annotated, those laws and the state laws that are going to be, the most important.
Question for you, sir. How often do we have to renew the license, and does that involve retaking the test?
Well, the license is renewed every 2 years. You never have to retake the test, but what you do have to do is get continued education. This course right here is worth 16 hours of continued education. The benefit for the individuals that work with us is, we are one of the companies that provide that certification. So every 2 years, when it's time to renew your license, you just have to get 12 hours of of continued education credits to renew your license. They have liability insurance, but a lot of this really hinges on the company more so than the private investigator. Certain bonding or insurance that they like for you to have. And of course, you got to renew your license every 2 years and complete. It says 16 hours, but it's actually 12 hours within a 2-year time period. So the laws and requirements for investigators, they vary from state to state, but everybody typically requires 12 hours of continuing education. Some licenses are 2 years, some licenses are 1 year, some licenses are 3 years. Florida is a 3-year license. Tennessee is a 2-year license. Kentucky is a 2-year license. Certain states, kind of South Carolina, renews every year. So it's typically a license that most people aren't that happy with, because that in addition to the continuing education, you have to pay the licensing fee. In the state of South Carolina, that license fee is $350. The state of Tennessee, the license fee is only $100.
Do you know what it is for Mississippi?
Because there's no license in Mississippi, you don't need it. But the most important thing I tell people about Mississippi, we always want you to have a Tennessee license. And the reason I say that is, if you run into a situation where you may have to come in contact with local authorities, or whatever the situation may be, maybe you got made on the case, or whatever the issue may be, maybe it's your setup, maybe you've been approached, you want to have some documentation. Because really, if you're looking at it from the standpoint of, let's say, you're a Mississippi investigator, you don't have a license, that situation can be perceived a million different ways. It can be looked at, if that individual is saying you're stalking me, it can be received many different ways. So that license ensures that you have necessary training, that you understand what the laws are, and you have the required credentials to be doing what you're doing. Because a lot of times in situations, especially like workers' comp, a claimant, as they refer to them, will exaggerate that situation. So you want to make sure that, all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. So what we have up here is the Tennessee Code annotated. The Tennessee, and it's had several laws pertaining to private investigators. I grabbed a couple of them. That's the law regarding licensure. You meet the requirements, complete the background check, work experience, pass the state licensing examination. Conduct is what I was in terms of the highest ethical standards. And some of those things we'll talk about in terms of surveillance, in terms of, how you're moving, how you're going about your day, to make sure that you're meeting the necessary standards, in all times, because that information, once you turn in that report and that video, can end up going to court, and you don't want it to get kicked out of court. So, authority, investigators have a certain amount of authority, ability to make arrests for, offenses, committed in their presence. Doesn't happen a lot, but obviously it's in the laws. I've never known any investigator to do that, but it's in the laws. Record keeping, required to maintain, accurate records of all work performed. We'll talk about updating the client. We'll talk about report writing. If you do interviews, if you're conducting background checks, you have to maintain that particular information for, as it says, at least 6 years. We kind of push for 10, but at least 6 years. Once again, it's the liability insurance, but really not really required so much for investigators as much as it is for companies. So you definitely want to make sure that you are knowledgeable about the TCA. And like I said, there it is right there. Section 62, 6226. That whole area right there deals with private investigators. So when you go to learn, to prepare for your exam, just make sure that you're familiar with the Tennessee Code annotated as it pertains to private investigators, because that information, I assure you, will be on the test. Not all of it, but a good portion of it will be on the test. Once again, there's the state laws, which we've already covered. Now, in a lot of situations with a lot of states, there's what they call reciprocity. So if a case, and the best way to describe it, a lot of people confuse it, they flip it, they turn it 15 different ways, only one way. If the case originates in Tennessee, these are all the states that you have reciprocity, meaning that you started at that individual's house, you're working that case, and he drives into Kentucky. You can keep following him into Kentucky, even if you don't have a Kentucky license. What most states offer is 30 days that you can work within that case. So let's say you follow this guy and he goes to, let's say it was some museum up there. Amusement park. You can follow him to that amusement park, stay with him, his family, whatever, whoever he's with, for that whole week, come back. And everything that you've documented, everything that you've recorded, fine and legal and within standards because of the reciprocity. A lot of times in other states, if you all, like I said, if you guys chose to say work for another private investigation company, they will tell you there's reciprocity, but that's not always the case. Every state does not have reciprocity. Certain states are really particular about you coming in, no matter where that case originated. And in those situations with those companies, it's best to contact the investigator in that state. I remember in the early years, we had a guy that wasn't licensed, and he's following that guy, let's say to North Carolina. We're already communicating with that North Carolina investigator to pick him up on the interstate. Like, hey, we're coming up on exit 186. They'll get on the road, they'll follow behind him, tail off, and they'll take him from there. One of the reasons why I have so many licenses is in the beginning, Tennessee is surrounded by 9 states. So you never know which direction somebody's going. So per se, if I'm working a case and it started, let's say in Tennessee, and that person decides they want to go to Atlanta, I'm going to Atlanta. They decide they want to keep going down to Tallahassee, I'm going to Tallahassee. They want to go down to Miami, I'm going down to Miami, because I hold, all of those licenses that I hold. So it's always good to have more than one license. I'm not saying it's required, but it's always good to have more than one license. And what they refer to that is limited license, recognition agreements, that Tennessee has. Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, North Carolina, in Virginia, but your present license in Tennessee needs to be current, and all your requirements need to be met. If you are actually looking to utilize the reciprocity relationship. Now, when we spoke about reciprocity, I told you the great thing about the great state of Tennessee, even though we're in Mississippi, they have true reciprocity. When I say true reciprocity, this is, I said people would tell you other states that you can get your license in Tennessee, you can get your Arkansas license, you can get your Kentucky license. You don't have to take an exam. All you got to do, pay your fee, do your background check. That's it. Anybody else want to be licensed in those states? They've got to take the exam. Everything you do to get your Tennessee license, they're going to have to do in Arkansas and Kentucky. These two states here, you got a Tennessee license and you want an Arkansas license, you reach out to the Arkansas Police Department. They're managed for the state of Arkansas, State Patrol. Reach out to them, you submit your application, you pay your appropriate fees, they do the background check, they mail you your license. And of course, every 2 years for both of those states, it's 2 years for both of those states, and you would send them your continuing education. But the beauty of it is, once you've done it for one, it's good for all of them. So you don't have to get one just particular for Arkansas or Kentucky. Your Tennessee, going online, taking the course, for instance, this course will suffice for every other state that you may be licensed in, that requires it. So, in my opinion, like I said, everybody has a difference of opinion. I say it's true reciprocity for the mere fact of these two states here. It's very easy to get your license. Once you've met the requirements in Tennessee, all you have to do is pass the background check and submit your fees.
So are Arkansas and Kentucky the only two true reciprocity states? Okay.
And in my opinion.
Yes.
So there is reciprocity, your ability to go in other states, but this right here, what I enjoy is the fact that you don't have to go through that process again. Take another examination. Take somebody like me. I hold a lot of licenses. So I've been licensed a long time, over 20 years. I can tell you now, Mississippi, I told you, there's no license. There's no state licensing board or anything yet in Mississippi. I'm sure it's coming. Alabama used to be like that. Alabama, you would just get a business license, which was kind of similar to Mississippi. You get a business license and you're a licensed investigator, and you got it in Jefferson County. I think it was probably been 10 years now, maybe longer. A lot of people in Alabama had a problem with that. So they lobbied to state representative, if I'm not mistaken, and long story short, now you have an Alabama board. You're required to do an Alabama license. You're required to get continuing education. There's people just coming in to their state, and they were losing the revenue. That's also a form of revenue a lot of times for states. The fees and the money that you get for the examination, for the licenses, is applied towards, certain things with the state. So I said all that to say, somebody like me who holds a lot of licenses, been licensed a long time, when Alabama shifted, I was kind of on the fence if I want to take examination. I felt personally, it's kind of like we were talking about with Pinkage. I felt like I should have been grandfathered in. I'm like, I got 14 licenses. You want me to take a license here? I've already taken all these other examinations, or, because other states you have to take an exam, So you want me to license here? So it's a little tricky, but at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if Mississippi starts doing that as well.
So, question. Mm-hmm. So, because you have the many licenses, is the exam pretty similar from state to state? What's the biggest difference you see in them?
Well, I will tell you this. It is different from state to state, but for what I understand, there's one company doing it now. PSI is the company. The same one who will administer your exam is doing it in Georgia and a lot of the other states. But what I'll also tell you is, once you get a license, and if you got several licenses, a lot of those states you won't have to take the exam. You know what I'm saying? Georgia is somewhere you can get licensed. You can take an online course, 70-hour course, pass it, get licensed, and work up under a company. If you want a company license, that's where it gets tricky. there's examinations for that. So in Georgia, for instance, I had to take an examination in Georgia, to get licensed. Florida, not so much. I was actually grandfathered in Florida because I think Florida was the second license I got after I got my Tennessee license. And back when I got my license, all you did was submit your paperwork. There was no exam. So, that's, for me, I guess that's the hardest part for us. And I say us guys who have been in this industry 20 plus years, as you see the change, and then people are kind of wanting you to, requiring you, and you're like, kind of like the Pinkertons. We've been doing this thing so long, and because even with that, with the examination, there's a lot of buffers and fillers, like I told you, within the questions. And we didn't have that. When I took the Tennessee exam, you came into a room like this, you took the examination by hand. On your way out, the guy was sitting at the desk. He would take that exam and he would grade it right there. He'd tell you, pass or fail right there. Right. 75 to pass. You knew if you, now, of course, it's electronic, so you'll know at the end of the examination, but just to show you how old school it was and how few people it are, that was doing it. I think our company license is like 1,205, 1,205, probably in the 2000s now, so there's probably been 800 companies who've gotten licensed in Tennessee, since I've been licensed as a company in Tennessee. So just to summarize, we spoke about the requirements of becoming a private investigator, TCA laws regarding private investigators, state laws for private investigators, and reciprocity laws. So we're going to cover briefly types of investigation. First, like I said before, typical day for an investigator, an investigator at Masterchek. You work remotely from home. You have daily documentation of activities when assigned on a case. So you'll work the case, you get the video, you follow the subject. We typically communicate, as it says here, with the team manager or team members. So at the 4-hour mark, you will call in and update. A typical day is normally 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., but it varies depending on the individual and their age. You may have a teenager that you're doing surveillance on at 21, and I promise you they're not getting up at 6 o'clock. So we have to kind of vary a lot of that, and we'll talk about that when we talk about case management and preparation and things along those lines. So 6 to 2, reporting at the 4-hour mark, reporting at the 8-hour mark, update that team member or that area manager or operations manager. Typically, the person that you are reporting to is either area manager or operations manager. It's typically their title. You drive to and from the case. So like I said, you work remotely from home. So when you get home, you log into the case management system. You put your update, you upload your video, you're done. Everything at that point goes to the back office. They may make some edits to the update. They'll look at your video, they'll grab some snapshots, some photos for the client, and then they'll email those out to the client and update them in terms of what took place on the case. Occasionally, we have client office visits, that a lot of times may involve me. I may take the investigator, if maybe something pertaining to their particular case, or depending on where we are with that particular investigator. I mean, in any situation, there's promotions, there's, so as you elevate through, you're learning more things on a level, further up. So you may have to go out, like I said, talk to clients and troubleshoot, issues pertaining to a case or pertaining to a particular situation on a case, not being able to obtain information or whatever the case may be in that regard.